Arrogance simply means, what about me? One of the familiar themes of Pesach, of Passover, is humility. Because, of course, the matzah, the flat bread, unrisen, is a symbol of humility. The bread that rises, that is full of air, is a symbol of arrogance. So humility is a big theme in Pesach because matzah is the essence of Pesach. And that's why it's so important that you eat a piece of Pesach matzah at the proper time on the night of the Seder after nightfall, when it is really the day of Pesach and not the day before, and that we eat a certain amount of it, not just a nibble, and that we do it intentionally, not a bite here and a bite there. Usually it should be about a half matzah if it's the handmade, or a whole matzah if it's a machine-made. But that's the mitzvah of Pesach. So the humility that it represents is a big theme in Pesach. So let's examine this notion of humility a little bit. Contrary to popular opinion, humility doesn't mean I think I'm a loser. Humility doesn't mean that I deny whatever talents I have or whatever strengths I have, whatever good I've accomplished. That is not humility. The humble person knows exactly who he is honest about himself, does not exaggerate his virtues, but he also doesn't exaggerate his faults. In other words, there's no exaggeration in humility. Humility is not dishonest or untrue. Now, we find an interesting thing on Sukkot. One of the 4 species that we take on Sukkot is the esrog, the citron fruit. It, we are told, is a symbol of humility. In fact, the Hebrew letters that spell the word esrog stands for, is an acronym for Al Tavieni Regel Gava. No arrogance should reach me. So here we find, interestingly, that in Sukkot there is a theme of humility as well. We also find on Shavuos, the day the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. What is it about Mount Sinai? It was not the highest mountain, which symbolizes humility. So it seems humility comes with every holiday. And yet it's different. The humility of Pesach produces freedom, because Pesach is the celebration, the festival of our freedom. On Sukkot, which is the festival of joy, it seems that the humility produces happiness. It's not that big a puzzle, but if we can spell it out and make it very clear, it would be helpful. Humility produces joy, humility produces freedom. What is the difference? So we're told that with the esrog, how do we see the humility of the esrog, of the fruit? It stays on its tree through all 4 seasons. The esrog doesn't have a season for ripening. which means that it grows during the winter, it grows during the summer, the fall, and the spring. Whatever season, whatever atmosphere, whatever climate you give it, it finds a way to thrive and grow from that climate. So if it's warm and dry, it flourishes. If it's cold and wet, it flourishes. What enables it to do that? Humility. So humility in this case means not being overly particular or restricted to one possibility, to one reality, and incapable of handling another. In other words, it's not a fixed, rigid existence. It adjusts. In order to be able to thrive from every atmospheric condition, you have to be flexible. What does it mean to be flexible? In very practical terms, it doesn't have to be my way. I did it my way is a compliment only if you could do it all different ways. You're flexible enough to adjust to every condition. But if you do it my way because that's the only way, that's a little bit of a rigidity. That's a very finite, limited capacity. It is not something to be proud of. So, in this case, the humility consists of not being locked into my particular choice, my particular taste, my particular opinion. As a result, whatever life throws at you, not only do you survive it, you grow from it. That seems to be the nature of the humility of the esrog. Now we come to Pesach, and we are told that humility is symbolized by the matzah, and the matzah is the symbol of our freedom. What kind of humility produces freedom? It seems to be the exact opposite. Freedom would mean free of interference, free of influence from the outside. Just very practically, freedom means you can't enslave me. Forces outside of me cannot control me. An exact opposite. The esrog says, I'm totally flexible. I can adjust to every external condition, to the weather. The freedom of Pesach says, those external forces cannot enslave me, cannot control me. I am not a victim of my circumstances. Seems to be the opposite. And yet they're both produced by humility. So we're getting a really impressive and broad view of how helpful and how healthy humility is. So let's take a closer look at the essential quality of humility. See, before God created the world, there was only Him. There was no consciousness other than Him. There was no self-awareness because nothing existed. When God created the world, heaven and earth, there was suddenly an awareness. Creations were aware of themselves, like angels, souls, humans, even animals are self-conscious. They sense their own existence and are affected by it. They sense their own existence, they'll fight to survive. They'll run from danger. They'll search out food. Because they're aware of themselves and want to preserve that self. Maybe even plants have that self-awareness on a vegetable level. Like the walking palm. The walking palm is literally a mobile tree because the side that faces the sun gets more nutrients than the side that doesn't. So it develops roots on the side where the sun hits it. So over 2 or 3 years, the roots develop towards the sun, and the ones not facing the sun kind of die out. So literally, the tree has moved over. It follows the sun. That sounds like a bit of a self-awareness. I go to where my survival is more guaranteed. But be that as it may, certainly animals, humans, angels, souls have an awareness of self. This awareness of self is possible only because God hides. If God's presence were not hidden, we would be incapable of having a sense of self other than Him, a sense of separateness or independence. So arrogance means the development of a sense of self-awareness. The stronger the self-awareness, the greater the arrogance. So again, arrogance doesn't mean I think I'm smartest, I think I'm the best, I think I'm the greatest. Arrogance means I think I am. I think, therefore I am, therefore I'm arrogant. So arrogance can be a very subtle thing. It's not the distasteful boastfulness of an arrogant person who looks down at everybody else and has an air of superiority. That's arrogance out of control. But on a much more subtle level, arrogance simply means, what about me? What's going to happen to me? Is this good for me? Did anybody notice me? What about me? That is what we call arrogance. So, what is humility? Humility doesn't mean I think I'm stupid, I think I'm a loser, I think I'm a pitiful creature. No, because if I'm thinking about me, there is no humility there. So humility must mean I think about you. I'm concerned for you, I'm aware of you, I'm conscious of you at all times. And whenever anything happens, my first thought is this good for you? Is this going to harm you? Is this going to be beneficial? Just as I would think about myself if I were arrogant. Obviously, in a relationship, this is crucial. You have a married couple, something happens, what's their first thought? If each of them, their first initial reaction, which is the strongest reaction, if each of them has an initial reaction of, is this good for me? Do I like this? Is this for me? Is this about me? The relationship is not that great. But if each of them has a reaction, how is this going to affect my spouse? That's not a question they ask themselves. That's their initial reaction, their default position. Something happens, how's my wife going to like this? How's my husband going to react to this? That's called humility. So, how does humility produce freedom? When a person is not self-conscious, but is tuned outward, like instead of my needs, I'm conscious of who needs me. What is the result? What kind of life would that produce? So there are two things. There's the joy that it brings, and there's the freedom that it brings. Freedom from external influences, no enslavement, and the joy of living fully no matter what the external conditions are. They're closely related, but they're not exactly the same thing. To be enthusiastic and thrilled about the external conditions because I can thrive and I can grow and I can live through all of them is a little different from not being affected by the external conditions. Really, this shows the superiority or the advantage of the Torah. See, Pesach says, no force in the world can interfere with who I am. I am free from influence. When I choose to do something, it's my choice, not influenced. When I form an opinion, it's really my opinion, for better or for worse, but it is not influenced by others. Not that I don't learn from others, but my conclusion is not based on how many people think this way. The conclusion is based on what I know. That's called free of interference or influence. That's called coming out of Egypt. So coming out of Egypt means I may not be right, I may not have all the answers, but I am not the product of my environment. I haven't surrendered to external influences. That was what the Jews maintained even in the worst days or years in Egypt. They didn't change their name, they didn't change their language, and they didn't change their dress. They dressed the way they did when they lived in Canaan. They spoke the language of Canaan, and they had names that they were given in Canaan. Egypt didn't have an influence on those three areas of their lives. Now, to say that they were all righteous people, well, the Torah hadn't been given yet, so a little hard to measure. But no, there were people in Egypt who worshipped Egyptian gods. They were not all righteous. And yet all of them maintained their names their language and their clothes. Meaning, I may not have all the answers. I may not be everything I'm supposed to be, but I'm not becoming you. That's the freedom that matzah represents. If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic, and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there's a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it. I want to invite you to join us as VIPs, partners in our work, and join us also for a personal chat with other members of the VIP club. We talk about many things. There's an opportunity to ask, to respond, to make a comment, to meet the other supporters. And together we can really make a difference in Jewish life and in life in general. So join us. It's goodtoknow.org. Log in, call, make contact, and join us with the VIPs.